Let's say you just finished Tears of the Kingdom. You had a wonderful time and you wanted more. You wanted more Zelda. So you go to the Nintendo eShop and buy and play every single Zelda game you see. You even play Hyrule Warriors. I feel sorry for you. But once you go through every Zelda game, you realize something. Something terrible. Almost the entire series isn't even on the eShop. You worry intensely for many hours, but then you remember that you're one of the 3 people who bought a Wii U. You go on eBay and search up Twilight Princess HD for Wii U, and then despair fills your body as you realize that there is no way in hell you're going to be able to afford that. This leaves you with 2 options. 1, you could go get a job and spend half your money, or 2, you can rob a bank. Give me the money. I need to buy Nintendo games. Give me the money. Give me the money. Where is it at? Where is it at? I don't understand what I did wrong. I just needed some money to buy Nintendo games. That's all I needed. I just need to buy Twilight Princess. Come on. Obviously, neither option is preferable. I mean, I can tell you from working in fast food that it isn't a fun experience. But there is one more option, and that option is Piracy. People think of emulation, they usually think of downloading ROMs online, which is actually a pretty fair assumption. Even though I prefer to buy games, it's usually because I have a love for collecting and displaying things on my shelf. It's not because I love the law. What do you mean I can't steal other people's cars? Says who, huh? Says who? What do you mean I can't drive in the sidewalk? Says who, huh? Says who? There's nothing wrong with driving on the sidewalk. What's wrong with shooting people? Like what's the big deal? I don't see what the problem is. Deleting evidence? I don't see the problem. I'm leaving. Even though I only play games that I actually own, it's perfectly understandable why someone wouldn't want to pay up obscene amounts of money to play games that are decades old at this point, and that aren't even officially sold on the Nintendo eShop. Let's say you're a sucker like me, and you do pay obscene amounts of money to play older games through emulation. Then does that make it okay through Nintendo's eyes? Apparently not. A couple of days ago, Nintendo decided to DMCA take down the Wii and GameCube emulator from Steam, the Dolphin emulator. While it is still up on GitHub, it does send a very angry message from Nintendo about how they feel about Dolphin and emulation as a whole. It's strange because according to the Dolphin emulator developers, none of the assets from the emulator use any of Nintendo's assets, nor do they encourage piracy of any sort. This is a post-editor's note, so apparently the Dolphin emulator does use some of Nintendo's proprietary software keys, which would legally justify Nintendo's action in taking down Dolphin from Steam. Mudahar made a great video explaining how this works and why this happened, and I'll link it in the description below. But it does make you wonder why it took so long to do anything to Dolphin, because these keys have been around for a long time. So, why does it have to be now that they took it down? And I'll touch on that later. Nintendo also decided to DMCA Takedown Lockpick, a service that would allow you to extract your own keys from your own legitimate Switch, so that when you put them in your emulator, the emulator could verify that you were using legitimate copies instead of pirated versions. So with all these efforts from developers to create helpful tools to be able to emulate games legitimately instead of through piracy, why is Nintendo so hell-bent on taking as much down as possible anyway? And I don't really think it has that much to do with piracy. Yeah, call me crazy, as Nintendo is always blaming these things on piracy. But let me explain why. Let's say you buy a copy of Super Mario 64, as I did, and you dump the ROM using a Retro Blaster. Nintendo doesn't get any money from that. The eBay seller gets the money, and the person selling the Retro Blaster. Now let's say you download it off the internet. Nintendo also doesn't get any money from that either. One of these ways is legal, and the other one gets you a virus. You mean to tell me I couldn't install Shrek Extra Large for free? My point is, whether you buy these games legally or pirate them, as long as you're emulating them, Nintendo isn't making any money. But ever since the Sony vs. Kinectix case, Nintendo has no legal precedent to take down emulators. So why are they doing this? While many have their own theories, I think it stems down to one major thing: the Nintendo Switch Online service. As you know, Nintendo has their own emulation service that you get by paying stupid amounts of money each year. $80?! This service has a ton of problems in my opinion, but a few of the big ones are this. 1, you don't own the games, it's tied to a subscription model. If you ever cancel a service, you lose access to these games forever until you resubscribe. 2, the emulation is usually pretty terrible and does not accurately represent what it was like playing on the original hardware. I'll leave a link in the description below to someone going way more in depth about this than I am. There has been some fixes to the hardware recently, but it's still not as good as fan-made emulation. 3, the game selection is terrible. Games such as Metroid Zero Mission are still not available on the service, even though it's an IP owned by Nintendo, and they have no real excuse to not have it there. Emulating the games from fan-made emulators provides a much more polished and modern experience that makes Nintendo's official emulators look like a joke in comparison. Features such as enhanced resolutions and frame rate hacks make some older titles feel like a full-blown official remaster. It would also explain why Nintendo just now removed Dolphin from Steam. If Dolphin went on Steam, a wider audience would have access to it and realize how terrible Nintendo's official ways of playing Wii and GameCube games are. Personally, I'd much rather spend $50 on Super Mario Sunshine and emulate it than pay $60 for a terrible port of the game to Switch. But luckily for me, I did both. Piracy and emulation wouldn't really be a problem for Nintendo if a large selection of older titles were readily available on the eShop with the tweaks you would expect them to have in the modern age. I mean, do you ever really hear about someone talking about wanting to pirate a Microsoft game? Why pirate anything from Microsoft if I got everything I need right here? Don't for the most part, because they have an excellent backwards compatibility system, as well as an option to readily buy games and play them on modern hardware. They actively support titles that are older, with remasters and sometimes even content updates. If only they could do that with their newer titles. Or release any good games at all. It's been over a year and Halo Infinite still doesn't have an infection! Nintendo simply doesn't care about piracy. They just want to be able to control when and how you play their games in every single way possible. They want to set the standard so that when they do release a crappy port of an older title, people happily pay $60 because there's simply no other option to play them. They want to make people so desperate that they'll pay and do anything to play these older titles. And that's really depressing because some of the most fun I've had gaming these last few months has been emulating older titles that I simply missed as a kid. Not only that, I've had so much fun hunting for good deals on retro games and increasing my collection slowly. Emulation is one of gaming's most important tools because it can give younger audiences a way to take a look at where gaming came from, as well as observe how much has changed and how much has stayed exactly the same. It is also a great way to preserve video game history, as we see many publishers, especially Nintendo, not caring about preserving this history at all. It is ultimately a gateway for you to have endless amounts of fun, and I sincerely hope that people creating these wonderful tools combat Nintendo and their unjust and cruel ways of attempting to shut them down. Well, at the end of the day, even if Nintendo takes down every emulator, it's not like they can stop me from jailbreaking my very own consoles and playing whatever I want on there. Oh.